morning. This is Morten from INKISH TV, and this is our very first webinar event ever. So bear with us if we have technical issues and if everything is just messed up. See, the thing is that when I am standing in front of an audience, I always feel very comfortable because I can see people, I can sense the feedback, I can sense basically everything. And now I'm talking to a screen. And while I am talking, I am waiting for the first presenter here at our Learn With Us. And I just look forward to this one. I hope it will be very interesting. I can tell you that the program we have done is in times where there's so many webinars around that how can you attract an audience for a show like this? And we wanted to be a little bit back to basics. And basically, when you hear the first session with Kit Tomshøj from Printvis, Printvis is a software for ERP MIS system. And you could think of them, maybe they want to spend the time presenting the products, and no, they don't. They have decided to give you an introduction to how you calculate prices and how the full cost model works. And it's a quite exciting presentation. And I also know, because I saw it yesterday, that there will be some introductions to new features that I have not seen in any MIS ERP system before. So I hope it will be exciting. And after the session with Kit, and I can see that Kit has joined us. Hello, Kit.
Hey.
So I had just been talking about all the things that you're going to present. So you don't have to present anything anyway.
That's nice. Thank you.
No, that's not true. So Casper and Kit, welcome to Learn With Us here on INKISH. It's as I presented just a moment ago, this is the first time we're doing a show like this. So I hope everybody will bear with us. I'm pretty sure you are as nervous as I am, because I know that as I just said before, standing in front of a crowd or standing in front of an audience or talking to customers that is not difficult, because that is what we do, right? But to talk to a screen and pretend that we are wise people, I think that is a challenge in many ways, right? So
don't worry, we're in the IT business. We have coffee and then we'll fake the rest. No problem.
I do have coffee too, so thank you very much. Before we get started with the presentation, and I just want to tell everybody that the presentation has been pre-recorded because you also have one of your American colleagues, Michael Bradley, along, and I think that it would be too evil to wake him up at this time, right? So who is Printvis and what makes you different?
Well, Printvis, in this industry, we are called and we are labeled an MIS vendor. So in a normal day, we say we do ERP systems, but we've given up that fight over words many years ago. So we do an MIS system. We come out from the Microsoft family, so that makes us a little different. We don't, we started out from the ERP system, started out from the Microsoft ERP system, and has been focusing on the printing industry for 20 plus years, something like that. And so our daily day is constantly looking at all the boring things about numbers and stuff like that, right? All the things that's needed to make sure that the printing companies, the packaging companies are actually running and making sure that they get paid and making sure that they can actually administer the business.
I mean, that sounds pretty, it sounds like something that everybody should already have, but I know from previous conversations that you still experience companies that are not using these kind of softwares, using spreadsheets, even pen and paper, right? So I think that your opportunities in the market are still quite large, right?
We are still very positive, yes. I mean, we still see now that typically printing packaging companies will use a variety of smaller systems. So typically I don't know what. Yes, spreadsheets for something, pen and paper for something else, and then 5, 6, 7 different systems for managing their inventory, their planning, their estimation, their quoting, their what have you. So that's if you start looking at what do we actually use of software in a lot of companies, you will see that a huge range of all different kind of softwares.
And talking about this, just to let people understand, I mean, you are obviously out of Denmark, same as we are, but you have offices in different places around the world. You're a global supplier, so where are you located?
We are right now, like you, sitting in Denmark. We have offices in Singapore and in US. We have people basically spread around the globe. I think we have customers in 32, 33 countries, something like that.
And you're smiling, and I was just about to say only 32 countries. We hope maybe one more or two more countries could come along during this presentation.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're always looking. Yeah. We have our company spread with employees sitting all over Europe, and in Singapore and in the US. So.
And if we look at very shortly before we see the presentation of what you have prepared, Kit, and how is the competitive situation? Is it a very competitive market that you are in, or how is that from your perspective?
It depends. It's very, very different from country to country. In some countries, there are a lot of local systems. And fighting against about the same customers doing different areas of the administration of the ERP side, and in other countries we only see one or two competitors. So it's in the Microsoft world where we come from, we don't see any competition. So we're the Microsoft alternative for this industry, which is.
That must be a very nice sweet spot to be in. But I have a suggestion now, because we have to get started learning something. It's nice to see you guys, but we need to learn something, right? So I suggest that you turn off your camera and your microphone, and then we will show the presentation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, and just for everybody to understand, this presentation is about, is it 20 minutes, Kit, or something like that?
Yeah, about 17, 18 minutes.
Okay, and then we have time for a Q&A afterwards, and I will be the one that asks you some of the difficult questions, but if anybody has anything, the chat is open, or you can even, for the audience, you can even click on the little hand in the lower corner where you can request to speak if you want to talk to us live. So everybody is very welcome, but let's see the film, right?
Many years ago, the calculation of print was simply done with pen and paper, and to make it easy on the estimator, who was often a business owner or a manager, quotes were often given in prices or 1,000 prices or price lists. Later, spreadsheets helped simplify and organize complex calculations, and eventually computers and MIS systems emerged and became affordable. These days, online business is thriving, and this makes it really important for us to be able to automate our estimates. The most important thing when calculating a production quote, and to do it automatically, is to know your basis of calculation. Your decision must rely on solid and confirmed data. You have to know your true costs. Direct costs are all expenses which are directly required to produce an actual item we're going to sell. For example, raw materials like paper and ink, as well as the value of actual time spent on a printing press, for example. Overhead can loosely be divided into two types, fixed and variables. The fixed overhead costs are those incurred while running a business, but which are not directly linked to production. Examples would be monthly rent, utilities, and company cars for salespeople. For variable, We understand that some of the overhead costs will decrease if production is slow, and likewise will increase when production is active. If all production in a company is sold at break-even, the company would see neither profit nor loss. All vendors, staff and management are paid, and bank loans are maintained on schedule. Some may consider this an acceptable result, but it of course will not do in the long run, especially if the company is listed on the stock market. With the advent of the new MIS systems, the use of the total cost principle became manageable for an ordinary printing company. This means we go from learning our break-even from accounting after production to now intelligently calculating our break-even in every single job we quote. Here's a very simple pricing model for a job. To be able to calculate a quoted price on a printed product, we must be able to apply the same principle to all services and all items included in the production. We also understand that as quantities and characteristics of a product change, so may every detail in the estimation. And so it becomes imperative to know what we actually do in each stage of the production. Hourly rates. At this stage, it's very important to be realistic in budgets and forecasts of production. When we get it wrong, the company will continuously lose money. It can be challenging to determine with all the individual jobs. Often a substantial period needs to pass before the company can obtain an accurate overview of the correctness of their budgets. A major part of getting our cost rates correct is to calculate our overhead costs and distribute the weight of these to the cost centers on the production floor. There are almost only active production orders to pay for overhead costs. The rest of it will be the charges to items that we use in production. In a very simple model, it becomes very evident for us what matters most, and that is how many hours we have actually sold, rather than how much capacity we really have. For each individual machine, it becomes important to distribute a portion of the business overhead so that we can have our costs covered at the end of the year. The important thing is to find a realistic balance for each cost center. If the overall structure is out of balance, we will see a loss. Of course, it's easy and logical with just a single cost center, but when we apply this method to all production equipment, it can easily get complex. The process is of course more complicated and entails a lot of components to be sorted out and assessed individually. This is a vital task for management to create and review regularly, and it can be downright difficult. Some consultancy agencies exist specifically to help with this, and some MIS systems have such assistance built right in. Even so, after the analysis of the underlying structures, there's still an element of salesmanship to the final distribution of the burdens, because the market will always have an impact on what you can realistically expect to get at various cost centers. Some facts are evident from contracts and mortgages and physical footprint. Your warehouse costs should also be considered, such as amortization of your capital tied into paper stock, employees, trucks, and so forth. These things are then added up and distributed to cost centers on the active production area, the actual open hours, and the projected capacity usage. A nice benefit to a software solution is that it can be preset and then repeated quite easily. When all is done, this methodology will suggest the optimum distribution for each cost center. Though, once again, you will probably still need to apply some old-fashioned salesmanship as a final touch. The focus on cost drivers for actual activities and services tied up to a product is called activity-based costing. Here we have two examples from very different industries, but with the same line of thought. Just as in other businesses, we can pinpoint the production flow for each little activity and determine a price. For each process, we can now examine the cost drivers and conditions, and we can try to say what makes the machine go faster or slower. Once we can say with certainty what happens if, then we can start automating our calculation. We can also start considering customer options. Will they require being on site for a press check? This has a cost consequence, extra time where the job is on the press, with the machine standing still as we discuss the job with the customer. So, an extra charge to the customer should be factored. Let's dive into the costing activities on the printing machine. For each press, we would itemize the activities needed in the process of this machine into parts where we can predict the quantity and the speed automatically. In this example, we have the basic steps of a printing press, and each step has to be automated of the time calculation based on our best knowledge. Quantities are based on formulas, and run speeds are obtained from either speed table setup or a fixed value. It is quite important to evaluate each production step to see if this is a one-time make-ready cost or if it also applies to an additional quantity, which means that when the ordered quantity changes, this line will also change in cost value. Speed tables can be very simple, like this one, or more complex, incorporating formats, item qualities, and other details. A good rule of thumb is to keep things as simple as possible and only consider the most important variables. MIS systems have more or less complex scrap table setups. Plate scrap setup and running scrap vary the most, and so should be more carefully considered. While the system is focused on the details, on special situations and conditions which will impact production time, as well as material used to arrive at the cost of the product, we have simultaneously calculated a potential sales price for our quote. The MIS system does that for us. On the sales side, we encounter further complications: customers. Customers will demand price breaks, special pricing on some items or deliverables, and other variables that will disrupt our standards in your pricing model. But with a little more specific setup in the MIS, agreed pricings in certain situations can be managed. Let's look at some examples of what your MIS system will do for you. I've asked Michael to give us a look inside PrintViz.
Here we are on a quick quote screen in PrintViz with a customer and contact selected. We choose a product group for this quote request, in this case a brochure. Now we're going to further define it by choosing from some preset product configurations, a saddle-stitched brochure. We give the job a name, and then enter a quantity, which you can see updates the standard description field below, and automatically pulls in a basic template for the selected product. Because this is a generic template, we need to manually input the number of text pages as well as enter a final format size. The template is a pre-selected paper for the brochure cover, but for the text only the normal paper weight and quality is applied, so we'll choose a specific paper from our list. Having entered these base parameters, the product is further configured by replying to a simple and easy to understand questionnaire. Artwork is entered for 3 hours, and lamination is added to the cover. Finally, an extra quantity break of 10,000 pieces is entered, and then the job is calculated. A regular case with the 2 quantities has been created in the background. Now the required text for the included finishing is added to the estimate. Looking into the actual estimation created, you'll see all of the added processes, for example the times and ink quantities for the cover. And for the cross-folding, the different quantities are automatically calculated. When satisfied, the quote document is generated, applying field content from the case to a Word document. The generated Word document can now be made into a PDF and emailed to the customer.
Thank you. If we've gone through all the hard work of defining all costs to the detail, it would be really nice if this effort pays off in the end. It does, and one of the situations where it becomes evident is when you want to compare different versions of a job. I've also very kindly asked Michael to show us an example of that.
Here we are building another quote request. We can see our quantity of 12,500 brochures, 32 pages, 20 by 28 format with a 4-page cover, show our final format, and 4/4 color. If we take a look at the job card, we're presented with the current overview of the sales price and the fine details that have gone into this calculation, including our anticipated direct cost, the planned contribution margin, net profit, and more. Now let's say the customer wants an option to add lamination. When we go into the estimating card, we can simply key in the unit code for lamination and see that it's automatically placed in the correct process order. And we can see that the additional time and associated costs have been added to the pricing. And now we're shown the direct difference in pricing options from 67 to 68.81 just by selecting the individual lines. We can also easily create options for other ordered quantities. Type in 20,000 and the system will automatically calculate that. If we take a look at the decision overview window, we can drill down into the details of the pricing for all 3 quote options. Here we're reviewing just the totals, but we can look further into the levels for more details on things like profit margin, direct cost of materials, labor, and much more. Now if we want to extract the detailed price difference specifically for the lamination part, we can use the totaling filter to narrow down to that specific view. And when applied, we can see on the right side that we're given the specific totals that the system has calculated. In this simple example, only for the cost of adding lamination. But clearly PrintViz can take you from a rich overview down to the most minute pricing details of even the most complex estimates, so that you can make better pricing decisions.
It is so nice to know your costs and prices to the detail. But suppose your customer is looking at a more complex picture than just your quotation. The buying behavior and what the customer wants to pay is driven by a whole lot of other factors. Well, of course it helps to see clearly where your break-even is, even though you aspire to make a profit. Wouldn't it be great to know more about what the customer is actually willing to pay for it? Suppose they would be willing to pay more than you would quote? 30 years ago, the business owner would often know by gut feeling what the price should be, given that the customer circle was smaller and more loyal, as there were no internet. Nowadays, the picture is more complex. The turnover time from quote to acceptance is shorter and customers are not so loyal. Of late, MIS systems are beginning to utilize artificial intelligence in predicting the price point which will give the customer acceptance. Imagine that we try to replicate the years of experience of a seasoned estimator by feeding information about the last thousands or even hundred thousands of print companies' quotes and orders into a powerful supercomputer and use all this data to train an artificial intelligence model. At PrintViz, we are using Microsoft Azure machine learning for this. Now we can look at the estimated sales price based on our costing setup from a totally different perspective. With an AI model based on options such as product groups, specific and general customer preferences, season, delivery conditions, etc., the print company's own historical data will be used to evaluate the probability that the customer will accept this price, and even project the customer's reaction if we increase or lower the price. Finding the right price has been a theme for hundreds of years. Technology has been helpful in driving advances that we have made, and even as we are looking to the future, technology and management information systems is in constant development. Thank you for watching this video session, and we would like to invite you to our website if you want to know more about PrintBiz.
Wow,
We're back.
that was awesome.
Thank you.
And you're drinking coffee still. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm not sure I said that clearly before we started, but Casper and Kit, maybe you should also check the chat, because there came some quite good questions during the. Oh, you don't have a keyboard. Computer company without a keyboard. So when you're using Navision and PrintBiz, does it have a keyboard input, or is it only by mental power, or?
It's only by that's all it is, right?
Okay.
Right now we're sitting in our huge conference room, which has been very empty the last few months.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're back here, and I have a keyboard somewhere down.
But I think I have prepared some questions as well. But before we go to those questions, maybe we should, because we have a guy here, John Robin, and he sent it actually to me as a private message. I hope it's okay, John Robin, to post it here as a question to Casper and Kit. He's just saying, in case of offset, the ink coverage, is that factored into a case of digital production, or is there any difference in digital and offset parameters cost based on coverage? If I should try to consider what you're thinking, is that one of the, at least some of the issues that you have with for example, if you go to inkjet, is how do you calculate the ink coverage on jobs to make as accurate estimations as possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a very good question. From the MIS systems, what we do anyways is that we have a preset coverage and a preset usage of square meters per kilo or pound of ink, which is set on the ink itself, on the item card. That can be overwritten in each specific job, so that you can adjust the coverage as to how full is the print when you do it. That is the same for both inks and toners from our perspective. And then on toners, and there's also a question of short run offset. On the other hand, as those are sometimes fairly small quantities, for the job costing part of it, we typically that's typically a cost that we tend to flush. So whatever was pre-calculated is also what is flushed into the job costing. It's it's more time and more effort and cost to record it than it is to really use it.
I think that one of the reasons why this question, in my opinion, is also very important is because if you look at, for example, digital presses like inkjet presses, the price on ink is considerably higher than on inkjet. And I was also thinking from what you said, but also from more like generic thinking is you mentioned the AI as part of your sales price training kind of thing. What about estimation? Because I was thinking that often when you give a quote to customer, you don't know the ink coverage in advance, right? So I was just thinking that maybe that makes sense to say that, okay, if you have a lot of jobs printed on this device, you get like some kind of intelligence that when this customer is asking for a quote, we know that on average we use like this X percentage of ink. Is that something that you're considering or do? I mean
the new hot topic for every ERP system right now is the usage of artificial intelligence. I mean, this is what's going to be the next step in, and right now, since we were focusing on costing and sales price, we were presenting a little on what we do there. But AI is used, and is going to be used more and more everywhere in production to forecast what stock to buy, what inventory to use, but definitely also to analyze the jobs that you have been running, to see things like that exactly. Can we try to guess? Can we try to give a better forecast of, instead of just having a standard preset coverage? Could we try to use some AI to look into different types of job, different customers, whatever you have in, what you can get there? But I should say very often it's information we also get through the integration with some of the prepress systems.
Of course. So if you have, for example, a prepress system that typically renders the jobs and get an understanding of ink coverage, that is where you basically get the inputs from the devices into your. Okay. John Robin, he has a I don't know if it's a follow-up question, but a very good one as well, because he's asking, can we have same job multiple cost for digital and offset for short runs?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. That was the easy one.
Yeah. We do individual setup, right? And we set up the way that the machine is typically running. And you can also have alternatives where you can say, I want to have some certain things that I want to have calculated, but may not want to join or have in my end estimate. I can calculate things, information that allows me to compare two different versions or ways of producing, and still have a sort of an easy way of comparing what's the best way.
So one thing is obviously the technology used, and as far as I saw from Michael Bradley's presentation, when you had like the cost options, that was basically that if you have more types of equipment, then you can combine and see, okay, this I can make that profit on, and if I use that machine, and sometimes you can have like last minute decisions because of utilization, or it's occupied, or it's down for service, or whatever, right? Another question that is again from John Robin, and there are questions from other people as well, but he is a very good one here. He said about how about optimum paper size estimation calculation for books, either on 17 times 100 or 64 times 990. Do we have options? And I know the answer is that is correct, because I've seen that in a previous printing company I used to work for. Can you explain a little, because Kit, you gave a very good presentation on the mathematics and the logics behind the calculations, but this is a very specific question about how you calculate prices. I mean, you optimize on devices, on papers, and on bindings and things like that. Can you explain a little bit about how you do that, and what is it you offer?
When we give input for a new print job in our system, the system can be preset. Not everyone likes that, but can be set up so that it will suggest an optimum paper size. And then within a quality, you give in, a paper quality, thickness, and so on, what you would like, and then it will pick and what it thinks is an optimum within your existing items in your inventory list. That's what it does, and it does that based on an optimum layout that it suggests, like a normal 16-pager, etc. And if we do a 16-pager here, then the optimum size, because this is a cut format, for example, would be so and so. If that is not available, it's going to take the smallest paper that will apply to those criteria.
Yeah. But Mike, again, I like to put a comment on that, because what we also see now, which is quite interesting, is that we do see more and more companies trying to start working with some standard formats, instead of looking isolated at one job and say, what is the optimal paper size for that job, meaning what will give me the how will I utilize the paper most. We see more and more companies starting working with some standard sizes, which for just looking at one job perhaps will not be what you learn from the textbook, the optimal paper size, but in the long run it will mean that you can have jobs without that many changes and so on. So actually we see companies that start really focusing on that, actually making some good profit on that.
That reminds me of a thing I have been curious about for some time, is because when print runs are for sure falling, and I think that extends a little bit to what you're saying, Kasper, is the fact that that if you change paper size, and let's say that you have dispersion varnish on your offset machine, then you have also to take into consideration that the change of blankets, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that something that you also consider? So let's say that we have a very, very short run print job, and then basically it could, if from a pure mathematical textbook example, could be a one paper format. But you also know that right now you're running another paper format, and do you have those kind of intelligence built into it as well?
I mean, we're moving now. Now this session we focus solely on cost estimation, right? I mean, the entire ERP platform covers a lot of other areas. So we would look into how can you bundle jobs, how can you in your scheduling look at how to bundle jobs precisely, so you actually try to minimize the cost, minimize the changes, minimize the paper change, etc., etc. That's
cool.
Yeah.
Angelo, he's asking template read square application-based quotation. Is that available?
Yes, I think that is exactly what was shown in the video here. There you have some base templates that are framing what a normal job within a certain product category would be. So we have customers that have hundreds and hundreds of templates. Just as you have in your pre-press systems, you'll have hundreds and hundreds of templates. That's very convenient. And then we just group them into product categories, product groups.
Cool. Another Robert, that is not John Robin, but Robert, he is asking or commenting, the machine learning mentioned is interesting. Do they work, I mean you, work with the manufacturers of the equipment for valid data?
Yes and no. Yes, because yes, we do work with the different manufacturers of the equipment. With JDF integration and other integration measurements on machines and so on, we get real feedback from the machines. So yes, we do, and that part, the valid registration from the equipment, is very interesting when we want to look at our production and see how we can optimize it and evaluate if our costing structure is correct. That was a yes. The reason I said no was that the example we talked about here is another area of using machine learning, which is actually try to go totally on the customer side and see, well, let's try, instead of looking at the production, instead of looking at how can we do this most optimal and so on, this is what your costing calculation should be. Then let's try to feed some of the supercomputers we can use now for artificial intelligence. Let's try to feed them with the data the customer knows. I mean, of all your thousands of orders that you have had in the past, so your own orders, but with the parameters that the customer know. You know, what are they ordering? What customer is it? What geography is it? What time of year? What is the delivery horizon? What kind of paper, etc., etc. And try from that part to see what do we actually think, what is the probability that a customer would accept this quote. And looking from the customer perspective, he doesn't care anything about what your equipment has given a result. A customer doesn't care if you used it on one machine or the other. He's just looking at what he's ordering. And then we try to, at least we also use AI for something else, but that is the thing we try to describe here. Try to go in the customer's shoes. Try to get that, in Danish we say fingerspidsgefühl, right? Try to get that sense of what is this customer, what is the right price for this customer?
But Kasper, both you and I know that is one answer to the equation. But the other question could be, if you look at the AI for quotes, which is really great that you can take the data and figure out about that one. But I think that the question could be equally, if the market prices, whatever that is lower than you can produce it at, and then you had like equipment data, then it could also suggest you to what equipment to invest in, right?
Oh yes, definitely.
So that was like
one of the things you also see, which is actually quite fun when you start to analyzing, right? In most production companies, most printing companies, you would actually have some orders, hopefully not a big percentage, but you would actually have some orders where you do not make money. And if you can try to analyze these orders and anticipate which one is it. If you can just stop doing them, then you're actually making money by doing nothing, and that's something we really like, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think it will be maybe the last or second last question in this round from the chat group is again John Robin. He is very active. He says, sorry, you don't have to be sorry, this is great. Last one is imposition based on finishing, section soon or perfect bound to factor in folding and binding margins based on finish equipments. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, it does. We do take those parameters in when we make the layouts of the and the estimation of the optimum sizes. We do factor in those values. But we are an MIS system. We are not a pre-press system. So we do something that we try to cut it where we think it is likely or prudent that the estimator, the salesperson, whoever, knows, to a certain extent what to do, and then some pre-press things are applied afterwards. But we do take that information from the finishing, we do take into account the fold size and stuff like that.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you, that makes sense, but I think that, I don't think this is like about a pre-press question in that sense, because I think from my perspective, it's more like if you have section soon books or perfect bound books, you can have different usage of paper, right? So if you have that, you have to take a lot of considerations into to make that calculation, and I guess that is why people are asking this, because you really need to understand that that it does change also the binding on the total calculation, not just the finishing line, but also the paper usage, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I'm sorry, we have to rush a little bit because we are on the very last minute, and I think we need to shout out to people that it's great that you're participating. Even Jacob Hedegaard Hummel from Heidelberg is commenting, and he is actually trying to throw in some promotions. So that's great, Jacob. He is promoting that Smart BI from Heidelberg should be the answer to some of the solutions. I don't know if you agree on that one, but I think that Smart BI looks really cool, and I think that your software looks really cool too. And
I comment because I saw Robert, who got up very early, and I think he deserves some answers. Thank you for that, Robert. Typical time to implement is 30 to 40 days in an average small size company. That can be longer or shorter depending on the abilities that can come into the project from the customer side. And
you have no more time, Kit. You have to answer them in the chat here. So I'm sorry. No, I want to thank you very much for a really great presentation. I think it was really great to talk to you as well to get some answers. I think that we have covered most of them. I know there was a few questions I prepared that I didn't have time for, but then you have to, maybe will you share your presentation as well, or how's that?
Oh yeah, we will put that on our marketing will. Marketing will do something. There will be something.
Okay, or you can just put it in the files folder here next to you, and then it will be available for everybody who's joining here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time and for your pleasant company and sharing with us. That was totally cool. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye. Great. Bye-bye. Well, we are back after, I think it was a quite exciting presentation by the nice folks from Printvis. So welcome back to the next session here. And this time we are going to talk to one of my dear colleagues, Henrik, who is my business development manager here at INKISH, and he has a quite comprehensive background. So welcome to the show, Henrik.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Always welcome.
So yeah,
who are you?
well, I joined INKISH almost a year ago now, and it has been quite exciting to be in this industry. Previously, I have worked in companies like Deloitte with consulting. I've been working in airline catering, and so I've seen the SARS several times, and now we have one similar event like this, unfortunately. But I've also been having had my own company for 5 years, and so I know the drill with the efficiency, with the sales, and then I've been teaching for, well, actually I just calculated in total 10 years as an external associate professor for Copenhagen Business School, and actually on full time as well for 5 years. So I've been trying to teach different kinds of lessons, and I've learned, a lot from theory as well. And the interesting thing is that, when you teach, and most of you guys who have tried to have the course on marketing probably know the 4 Ps. And in theory, they mean price, product, place, and promotion. But when you try it in real life and you discover that you're in front of a customer, the 4 Ps sometimes becomes please, 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 please buy my product. So
the problem is that when you just said what you just did, you can't count because you said please 6 times. So that is not so good for your repetition, I think, right?
But I'm a very pleasing person.
Okay, Henrik. Before we move on to your presentation, I think that one of the things that is evident is that you have one thing in theory, and another
Yes.
thing is daily operations. And I was actually rephrasing your name of the presentation a couple of times because we started discussing about having this just after talking to Printvis, because one thing is that you can calculate the prices. Another thing is that you can maybe even use artificial intelligence for having the right kind of understanding of where the market prices are. But it's also a fact that discounts are influencing your profit way more than most people probably think, right? And that was why I was thinking that it could be great to have a session talking about, the how to get rid of margins easily, right?
Yeah, I think that, and sometimes, in sales process, we tend to get very focused on getting the sale, and there is sometimes situations where you bring home sales, which is perhaps not at the margin that you wanted to bring home. And I think that Kit and Casper shortly touched upon it, that to identify the jobs that you do which you don't make money from is actually very important. But if you were also able to, in your talk track, to make sure that you try to talk value with the customer instead of the price, and by that increasing your margin, or get away from talking about the price as such, that might be beneficial as well. So, but I think that AI and other systems, ways of collecting data will probably make us much wiser in the future, because this is one area.
Or way dumber, maybe.
Yes, but it's important that we ask the right questions, right?
Yeah, that's true. So, are you ready to take it away?
Yes, I am.
Then I will just leave it up to you and see if it works. Otherwise, you just shout help. I'm sitting next door, right?
Yes.
Great. Take it away, Henrik.
Thank you. And you should be seeing a presentation right now on your screen. So the first point here is the objective. The objective of having this short session is to talk a little bit about how not to destroy value. And this is, of course, an evergreen topic in all industry. no matter whether we talk restaurants, printers, or even technology sales. It is something that is really important to be aware of. And I have probably, like you, most of you who are listening, also tried to do practical sales. I've tried to do the theoretical part as well. And in this little session, we will talk about how, from the printer's perspective, could we increase prices and increase so that we most likely price the value that we create. And we are watching everything from the printer's perspective. So sorry, we're watching everything from the printer's perspective. And just to make sure, that not to disappoint my audience, but I don't have the magic equation for pricing, but I will, however, try to elaborate and come up with a couple of systematic points about the area. So what is the right price? Well, we will try to develop an understanding of economic value of customer, and also how to manage price pressure from different customers. So those are the three topics that I'll shortly touch upon. What is the right price? Well, the value to the customer is equal to the benefits the customer gets minus the sacrifices that they make. And benefits in this case could be all the positive things that we give to the customer, like fast response service, self-reporting on performance, quality assurance, and the sacrifices will be the price the customer pays, but also sort of perceived risk that the customer will have by entering into a relationship with us. So value is created from the core product plus what we can wrap around the product of that core. A typical pricing practice that Kit also talked upon is the full cost measure. And the full cost is a way to get your average costs plus a markup covered through the price. The purpose of this kind of pricing is that it's easy, of course, and it's relatively easy, and it's to guarantee a margin on each job. However, it does tend to get a very internal focus because the equipment efficiency and other factors will be different from company to company. So there is actually a risk that with this sort of pricing, you can price yourself out of the market, or you can price yourself too low. And therefore, their idea about creating IA data about the customer's willingness to pay is something that we all dream about getting. If we knew what the customer was willing to pay, our life would be so much easier. So if we just take a brief model of a print shop, this is very rough numbers, but we have 3 times 30% costs and a profit of 10%. And this is not a totally far-fetched model, because we used the profit margin from the Danish medium-sized printers, who in the last 3 years have had an average of profit margin between 8 to 12% in their annual financial statements. That's why we took the 10%, which is also a very easy number to calculate with. So that is quite lucky. We will use this model to make a couple of illustrative examples, because if we look at this very, very simple example, we have a product with a sales price of 10, costs of 9, which gives us a profit per unit of 1. So this means that our total profit will be 100 on this job. If we look at the discount and we give a 2% discount, what would that mean in our case? Well, in this case, our new profit per unit would be 0.8, and our total profit would be 80. In order to be able to compensate for this kind of discount, we can actually calculate that we would have to sell additionally 25% to compensate. This is quite interesting, and of course, this is a constructed example. However, I think that sometimes when we go back and looking at our previous sales, we can probably find situations where it would have been nice to calculate this or to have this calculation in mind before we entered into an agreement. So the idea here is to give you the perception that even small discounts can actually matter, and actually it destroys profit much more than one would expect sometimes. And this is why, for instance, the previous lesson with the MIS system was actually quite interesting, because that could give us some of the data that we need, but also perhaps point to where we would look in the future. So if we give a discount and that happens, then at least let's make sure that we get a positive return on a discount. As we saw, a small discount in this constructed example would actually mean that we have to increase volumes substantially. This is not and this is important to remember when we enter into discounts. Another thing we could ask for is, of course, longer relationship time. We can do that via either long-term discounts or similar, or via long-term contracts. Then, of course, faster payment is also an important parameter. And last but not least, a discount should be seen and should be used in the customer relationship as a positive investment, which of course in time should yield a positive return, but also something that we should make the customer aware of. Another example, so in order to look at what does it actually take to compensate for discounts, and what does it actually mean when we talk about increasing, for instance, the quantity sold, we can see here in another example, and this is the same simple example that we have constructed, that if we increase the number of units sold, we would go from 100 to 110. The sales price would still be 10, cost 9. The profit would be 1. So in total, by an increase in volume by 10%, we would increase our profit by 10%. We could also have a look at the materials cost. Let's say we reduce the ink and substrates by 10%, just as an example, or the overhead by 10%. Both of them were 30% of the total cost. That would give us a cost which is 8.7 and a higher profit per unit. In total, 30% increase in profit. But if we look at the same model and we're actually able to increase the price by 10%, all other things being equal, we would actually increase our sales price from 10 to 11, and costs would still be the same, and that would increase the total profit by 100%. I know that this is simple examples, but working with these ideas about how to do this may sometimes be something that it would be practical in real day life. So how can we work further with this? Well, in order to work with this, we could work with the value analysis. So these simple calculations are an illustration of how we could work with our offerings. Economic value is the maximum amount that a customer should be willing to pay. And assume that he or she is informed about the benefits of the product, the offerings of competitors, the higher value in the things that we talk about. Our first task is, of course, to try to establish what reference product are we talking about, and from there build on top with a differentiation value. So the value to the customers will be the reference value plus the differentiation value that we can provide. And differentiation could be customer service. It could be delivery time. For instance, the customer service could all be all about how do we handle changes to orders, and there are more factors. How do we handle, the input for the order? Then, of course, delivery time. Can we deliver fast and hence reduce the customer's risk? Do we have a product range which will reduce the customer search cost and it also give us a better talk track? Do we have added value enhancement that would increase the value of the product we offer? And then, of course, all of our green offerings. Tomorrow, we have sessions where we have people who will talk about legislation and the climate calculation, for instance. These green offerings are more and more important and should be included in our differentiation value as well, because they will, of course, shine back on the customer as well. In our using of the economic value to customer, it is important that we view this as a maximum price, and we try to determine this before we talk to our customers. This could be handled, for instance, via our systems or similar, but determining the economic value before negotiating with customer is important, because then you know what is the maximum price that this actually could get in the market, and how do we negotiate down from there. And the fact that customers are not buying your product itself is not necessarily a reason to cut your price. It may be because you have to change your marketing or your communication with the customer to justify the price. There are, several steps around this pricing that I'll just get into nextly, but there are also, the customers will have some sensitivity regarding price, and it's also important to handle this sensitivity when we talk about price. So in order to give you something operational to work with when we talk about economic value analysis, it is important to firstly identify the closest competitive product. You probably already know this. Then identify all the factors that differentiate the product, as we talked about the service, the other differentiation factors like what makes the product more environmental friendly, and all the values that will be important to the customer. Once we determine this differentiation value, we can add this to the reference product, and then we can develop a value profile for each customer segment, depending, of course, on how many customer segments you have. But operationally, it should be possible to divide your customers into several segments and have differentiated prices for these several segments. And then, of course, it is important to develop a marketing program that educates customers about economic value. So once you have been through this exercise, you will have a pricing list. And of course, there will be pricing sensitivity. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is not necessarily the magic bullet for everything, or the magic equation, but it is to give you some food for thought to talk about prices. It is, of course, important to be aware of the substitutions. If there's a high price difference between this product and the perceived substitute, customers will be more sensitive to this, of course. If it's more difficult to compare, then customers will actually be less price sensitive, which is actually interesting. because then it's they add on the differentiation value, and it's more difficult to compare to other competitors. Customers are also less price sensitive if there's a high switching cost. So, and then least but not last, there's the fairness effect, that customers are more sensitive when prices seems unfair. This is a perception that can be very difficult to handle in a sale, because fairness can be a very subjective opinion. But these are the four main sensitivity factors that you can take into consideration when talking to your customers. So the idea of this lesson was to give you some tools for trying to calculate or promote your differentiation value, and also make sure, or at least take it into consideration when you price, in order to capture the value that you have created for the customer. So thank you for your attention, and I would love to go to some questions if there are any.
I think I want to say thank you very much, Henrik, for a very great presentation. It's always like when we talk about all the different things that we see in the market, is like how can you learn from your experience, right? Selling stuff. One of the things that you didn't mention so much about in this presentation is the lead-in time and the length of a selling cycle. I think that most of us are constantly challenged by the fact that sometimes it takes a very long time to promote and present and get through to the customer, and that is maybe one of the reasons why we also tend to sometimes use discounts as a method to get into a new customer relationship, which I, on the other hand, think may be difficult to get out of again. We have only got one question so far. I have some other questions as well, but Robert, he is asking here, should a discount be considered a loss leader only? What is your opinion about that?
I think that you can also view discount as an investment in a customer relation, but I think it's important that you go into this discount discussion with open eyes, because there is a tendency that once you have given a discount, it tends to be forever, or expected to last forever. And actually, customers don't seem to value discounts necessarily, because if they just think that this was because you had charged a too high price eventually, or there's a risk that if you give too high discounts, that the customers will look at your product as less valuable. So I think that of course you can look at discounts in several ways, and I offered some perspectives, but I agree that it can be used as an investment into a customer relationship. And especially if you are starting a customer relationship, this could be one way to get in. Mm. For instance, you can use the discount to reduce the customer switching cost.
Mm. I was wondering, because I think that, at least from my perspective, I think that one of the bigger challenges in the printing industry is that we have a lot of product that are seen as commodity products, where it's very difficult to see the differentiation between vendors, because basically if you order a 16 pages 130 GSM coated paper 4+4, it's essentially the same product you get. So, and that is of course why you also mentioned these differentiation kind of things that is very important to think of, right? But when you, I mean, because if you look at customers, this what you have been talking about is, from at least my perspective, more how a printer should see on it. Because I think that customers today, when you go to almost anything you buy, from a car to maybe even a printing machine, maybe even your daily groceries, it's discounts, rebates that is flashing all over. Does that mean that you simply just have to have a higher pricing point from the beginning in order to give a discount? Or because it's a discount is also like a mental thing, right?
Yeah, well, discounts works in two ways mentally, right? If a product is discounted too high, right, we sometimes tend to either think that the product is not very valuable, or we distrust the original price. We probably all know the experience from the supermarket saying, "Oh, 70% discounts this week." And then I'm thinking, yeah, you increased the price by 60%, and then you give me 70% discount. That is that is something that creates distrust instead, for instance. But I think that that discounts signal something about your product, and it's important to perhaps avoid that talk unless you have something which is very concrete, like, for instance, investment in a new relationship or a continued relationship, or try to weed out the shoppers. I mean, we all want to weed out the shoppers in our customer segments, right, or portfolio. We all know the customers who buy only occasionally and they always negotiate price, and the total cost of handling a customer like that in the long run will be significantly higher than the profit we'll ever make from a customer like that, perhaps.
But is it at all possible to market a commodity product out of the price question, in your opinion?
I think so. I mean, it all depends on what is the perceived value and of a product. And I'm thinking that if you can try to add features, then of course the look and feel of a product can become more exclusive. For instance, if that's the if that's the branding the customer wants.
But that is like moving the product from a commodity to a specialty, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a question from Robert again. He's saying, because we were talking about these, he was the one that asked if the discounts could be considered as loss leader only. And then he continues, do you mean like a loyalty discount based on volume of orders? And then he continues as a follow-up to that one. That's why discounts can be given to your best customers. They earn their preferential price points.
I think one of the important things that you can that should know about your customers is to divide them into high cost to serve and low cost to serve customers, and then high volume and low volume. This is a very simple way of dividing them, but an idea to get the customer to place more of their wallet in your business is, of course, to give them long-term incentives. Then you reduce your costs to have the customer, and you also increase the volume in the long run. So, of course, in that respect, to create long-term relations, discounts can be an effective mean as well.
Well, Henrik, as usual, it's a pleasure working with you, and it's a pleasure to listen to you. And for sure, your experience from being a teacher came through in this session, in my opinion. I hope that everybody enjoyed this session as well. And so thank you very much. Just to let everybody know, Henrik is online, so we can keep chatting with him if you like to. And then we will put in a little break, because in 15 minutes we have our session with Andreas Weber from INKISH Germany. He's going to give you a very good presentation about social media. And I think you can learn from him. So again, Henrik, thank you very much, and I hope that everybody enjoyed your session. I hope that everybody will stay put even for a lunch break, just to enjoy Andreas when he will be with us in a short time. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
see. I almost remember to click on stop video or the music when it was out of time. So now I am very, very honored and pleased to have my good colleague from Germany, Andreas Weber, on board. So Andreas, I can see you. Can I hear you?
Maybe you can hear me as well.
I can hear you. So have you followed some of the presentations so far today?
All of them.
All
And
of them.
I'm really amazed it's working so well to get all those different views and perspectives on our beautiful industry.
Yeah, and that is
more to come, I think. More to come.
Not even just you, but there's even more the rest of the week as well, right? And Andreas, in a moment, we're going to have a proper introduction of you, of course. But just before we get started, I think that this format is new for INKISH. And as you also relatively new to INKISH in Germany, I think that we can look forward to have a German version of diesem Webinar ganz schon in Deutschland, ja?
Wir geben unser Bestes. We try to do our very best. And originally we had that fantasy to manage German sessions parallel to the English ones, but that was not a good idea. And so I'm actually with Petra, who is managing with me the success of INKISH in the DACH region, which means Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And maybe we do something during the original Drupa schedule.
Oh, that
so
sounds
that's
great.
Something like 2 or 3 weeks from now on, and that could work. And for sure, we can learn a lot reviewing this week and how people will accept it, and maybe there are some burdens, maybe not. But I love that way to have a good conversation.
I tell you, I haven't slept for a week because I was nervous about the content. Then I was second about the marketing. Then I was worried about the technology. And then I was worried that if nobody wanted to listen to us, right? and you know, from time to time, you just have to throw yourself into the new things, and then as you say, learn from that, evaluate it. I think that you and I, we talk quite frequently to each other because I think that we have this passion for sharing knowledge and information and you know, sharing with the industry. And I hope that is, of course, what is the main output of this. And for those who see it live, it's great because we can have the chat, talking to people real time. And for those who don't have the time to see it right now, we will make it available for later views on INKISH TV and on the INKISH YouTube channel, of course. So, but why don't we just dig into it, Andreas? You are Andreas Weber, and you, beside being our CEO and country manager for the DACH region, as you just mentioned, you are a very broad, in a positive perspective, opinion maker in not only in Germany but also in from a global perspective. And I think that when I asked you to do this presentation, it's always with the kind of
Morten, actually right at the moment I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Your voice has gone. So maybe you have some signs and you could put it in front. Or could you hear me? Could you hear me? Ladies and gentlemen, it's a live session. For sure. And now I have a new training. It's reading Morten's messages right from his. Maybe that could work as well. In don't start to talk because then I'm out. Morten, I think I have to tell our audience that this is not something bad happening. It's part of the plan, just to strengthen our, which is social media. I cannot hear you, no. But can you hear me? Yes? Okay. What do you think about if I just start and we have a conversation later on? So, okay. Morten is happy that that we can start now, and it's a great pleasure and honor for me talking to you. And you know, I'm in the middle between getting the best knowledge and the best food because it's almost lunchtime. But when you check the recorded version, that will work fine. And you know, I can tell you a little bit about my own life. I'm an analyst and a knowledge worker since almost 30 years, dedicated to all the new technologies and also dedicated to print. And when I was much younger, I thought the best way to talk about print is using print material. But then all of a sudden, the point came out that we had so many interesting stories to tell, but we had not the right audience in our database. So print is good if you know the person to hand it out, to send it to that person. But if you don't know who else could be interested, you have a problem with print. And then I was setting up when digital printing came up more than 20 years ago. I thought there must be a good way to set up online conversations. And I was founding a digital printing forum community, and everything was based on a dedicated online system. And later on, we switched it to the internet. And I was so happy more than 10 years ago when social media came up. And the secret is, and I want to switch to my charts I have prepared. I hope it will work. Oh yes, it works. And I thought this nice little hashtag message in the bottle is key to my whole presentation. We need help to understand what is going on. I just told you the printing community is experienced in handing out printed material. But to reach a new audience, you need profiles, and you don't have those profiles, and you will never identify the right person. And therefore, social media is so great. And I will talk a little bit about that. And in short, let's call it SoMe because it's a little bit shorter. And SoMe is not simply a new communication channel complementary to others. SoMe is so different, and at least it's essential for survival in the digital age. And why is that so? First of all, SoMe is essential for transformation in the digital age. That means any kind of transformation must be supported by SoMe, by a good SoMe concept and a good execution of that. Because communication have to be anywhere, so ubiquitous. And you always have to gear towards interaction. And with the aim of making business success simple and targeted at the same time. And so SoMe distinguishes establish direct dialogues without intermediaries, and thus without deviations. And to activate relevant target persons that you do not need to know without having to maintain profiles and contact details of third parties. And it's good to be able to act sustainably. So that's the secret of social media. And the most important basic principle of SOMI is listen and learn. Think about it for a moment. And I have those two graphics, and you know, they look so different. That means on the left hand you have a word. It's all about direct marketing and the funnel and the funnel for customers, because they're forced to do something and they were guided and they were set under pressure. This is not what we want anymore. So it's all about from push to pull to listen. And it's so different, and we have a bunch of books about that. The change from the old way of doing marketing and also sales, and the new way of listening to the market, to the audience, prospects, customers, and then develop a strategy. What is the right product and solution for them? And in total, SOMI represents not a nice to have, but a must do. And why is that? It's so interesting that the roots of SOMI lie in the Clue Train Manifesto. Maybe you have heard about it. And it's about the end of business as usual. And it was created in 1999, so past year after the World Wide Web came up. And like Martin Luther at the beginning of our modern age was creating a 95 Thesis, also the fathers and mothers of Clue Train Manifesto created Thesis as a blueprint for Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all those beautiful things we have today. And I made a selection of some key messages out of those 95. The very first is the most important. It's about markets are conversations. As a result, markets are getting smarter, more informed, more organized. Participation in a networked market changes people fundamentally. People in networked markets have figured out that they get far better information and support from one another than from vendors. So much for corporate rhetoric about adding value to commoditized products. There are no secrets. The networked market knows more than companies do about their own products, because customers have the experience. And whether the news is good or bad, they tell everyone. Human communities are based on discourse, on human speech about human concerns. The community of discourse is the market. And the Clue Train Manifesto was so important for all of us that they printed even a Clue Train Manifesto book about it already in the year 2000 or 2001. And to summarize it, the key message is conversation creates conversion. And by the way, in our world, in the print world, we have this godfather of printing, Johannes Gutenberg, who comes from Germany, very close to the place where I live. And Gutenberg's invention for print innovation has also disruptively ended the way you did business until then. And today, Gutenberg would be a passionate SOMI fan. And even if he would not print anymore with movable letters today, he would print with movable data. So very into digital printing. That's my that's what I really believe. And when we come back to reality, to our times today, my analysis of the status quo, it's not that good, because many of us in the print industry appreciate and use SOMI only to a very limited extent. And so most of us give away a lot of business potential. So I created especially for you 10 tips to get started easily. And so my point zero is forget all about you have heard what social media could be or should be or whatever. just rethink, and maybe my 10 tips will help you. So number one is evaluate the appropriate platforms which fit to you, to your personality, to your business, and get to know the specific usage needs when dealing with content. Second, Facebook and Instagram are suitable for creative, playful content. Twitter is the #1 news platform, and it's so important, still important, because it's in by Google. So everything you Twitter could be researched via Google. That's different to other platforms. Facebook is a closed shop, and also LinkedIn. Number 4, LinkedIn is the #1 business platform. Messages work when they get to the point and are tagged with hashtags. In the beginning, it's enough to follow the message of others carefully, to comment, to share them, whatever you like to do. So it's not important to have on content in the first step. And the new contacts gained in this way enrich your personal network. And first of all, your own person, your own work, your own thoughts have to be in focus. Company accounts may only be set up if they are actually filled with relevant content and are constantly updated. So you need, depending on the size of your business, you need a good team to take care for your social media company accounts around the clock, 24/7. No vacation time. Blogs to deepen discourses and topics bring more than websites. The more specific a message, the more effectiveness and sustainability you can reach. These are my 10 tips. And to summarize it a little bit, what is the strongest hurdle, besides the fact that you can lose your voice or your sound or whatever because your Wi-Fi is collapsing? The strongest hurdle is the personal profile. And I can tell you, I was thinking so often about what is relevant for my audience to know about me. Is it where I have studied or whatever, or if I'm married and own a dog, a nice little dog, whatever? So this is very hard work, because your profile is the entrance to your audience and to the SoMe world in total. The greatest benefit is it's knowledge building and knowledge transfer. Relevant discussions take place about SoMe in real time, mostly through clear statements and good questions to the audience. It's not about this corporate thinking. I have a new product and I have to talk about it. The world is waiting for it. This is nonsense. Nobody is waiting for innovation before they know the benefit, of how to get a benefit out of it. And the best side effect is real-time marketing research. And it's in most of the cases for free, and you can track discussions about SoMe and evaluating reactions to review and optimize your own messages. And that's worth its weight in gold. So to send out a message, to track it, is in the same moment you get a real-time market research. And the biggest mistake is everything and nothing is measurable. And why I'm saying this, it's because the KPIs are different from what you know. It is not about advertising reach that counts, but qualitative impact, sustainability, relevance through good timing and the right joint of subject. How to design content and messages. It is a misconception that everything has to be short and sweet. Everything that is great can take longer, independent from what container you are using for getting your content distributed. The choice of content design depends on the topic. Videos work best when they are not made beautiful in Hollywood studio style, but when they are authentic and find their own style fitting to your own personality. Messages or content must always refer to something, to other posts, to other people, to events, and so on. The communication effect is significantly influenced by the special type of communication using hashtags. And that's important because algorithms who are driving all social media platforms, algorithms begin by displaying tweets posts more often when you use the right hashtags and the right combination of different hashtags. Ultimately, everything is best that is emotionalized, done with a heart, and not done by a marketing concept in that traditional sense. And by the way, some of the most exciting and successful startups rely on SoMe and mobile communication to market innovative print applications. 3 selected examples from hundreds. So the first one I want to share with you is Passbook. Passbook is a small little tiny startup founded in the year 2012 in Amsterdam by an Italian guy who had no experience with print. He was working for eBay. And he thought that to combine the world of photos and mobile communication and print, that would be a good idea. And it was a good idea. So it took him maybe 2 years to have a global reach, a huge customer base in the United States, good customers in Australia, and more customers in Europe as well. And magazines like Wired, which is the Bible for digital communication, they awarded him. Facebook liked him a lot. Deloitte, Hendrik talked about Deloitte. They have a ranking of the most successful European startups, and Passbook was on top of, and is still on top of that, all those rankings and recommendations. So amazing story, and just check out what they do. For sure, they run a website, but you will find them mainly on Facebook. The second startup idea, which is brilliant, it's called Instant Celebration. And it's founded also in Amsterdam. This must be the hotspot for print innovation and print and social media innovation. And it was founded by my good friend Jeroen van Drunen, who is the CEO of Jubels. And it was in cooperationship, or the idea came up in cooperationship with Fujifilm, and they created that Instax camera system you can see here on the slide, the follower of Polaroid. And the idea is that when you have a celebration, you need something to remember. And so print your photo, put it in a nice little leaflet and send it out, individualize it and send it out to your friends. It's a very interesting idea. And in the first moment when they were using Instagram mainly to promote it, they had an international global reach. It's an amazing story created by Jeroen, who is very experienced in the traditional way to do print in the past with offset and actually with digital printing. Third of all is Graphenia. Graphenia, maybe you know them. A couple of years ago, they joined the Online Print Symposium. Is a huge public company in the north of England, and they are wonderful because they created different brands. And printing.com is very popular. It's online print service, which is something like a market leader in the UK. They have the Image Group and Nettle. And Nettle is an interesting concept to organize outlet stores. They look like Starbucks locations, and it's all about offering web services, web design services, and when you have reached online your audience, you can inform them about the beauty of print, large format signups, whatever. And it's so online is the basis for the development of Graphenia. And the CEO, Peter Gunning, I like him a lot. He is wonderful. He is one of the toughest LinkedIn activists I know. And every good year, he is spreading out via LinkedIn. And now he has that idea that he offers other business owners who maybe are in trouble to join the Graphenia family to make them safe and to secure their future. So these are my 3 examples, and it's worth to step deep into what those companies do. And I'm sure there are hundreds of other examples as well. So to summarize what my talk is about, it's all about listen and learn. And it's all about human to human. And please never forget, never forget, markets are conversations. And I have some advice for you. And I took some notes and I will share those notes with you. So my advice is press the restart button to deal constructively, smartly, and playfully with SoMe. This brings more than the constant relaunch of your own website, which should hardly have any traffic anyway. And use SoMe as a source that does not stop bubbling in order to come into contact with new, active, highly interested people to conversation and to do sustainable business. And if you need a reference, we can always learn from the best. We have those GAFA companies. It's Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. All their life, what they do is based on this social media idea. And on one hand side, they are technology inventors to drive social media technologies in different shapes and kinds. And on the other hand, they are really good in using this way how to set up a conversation every day, every hour, every second. And so you can learn from the best. And and their challenge is to create exponential growth because transformation as the business, that's the philosophy. And this old world, and we in the print world are in this old world, we do linear transformation, and this is transformation in the business. That's not enough. And if you don't believe me, I have some further reading tips. Go to the website of Mark Schaefer. He has a beautiful blog called Growth, and he's writing books. He's blogging, he's a social media activist, and he is publishing books, and all his books are really on the New York bestseller list. And it's about social media. I have also a book in German. He's explaining social media, the basics. He is talking about how to get known via social media. And the secret of social media is that it enables the marketing rebellion. That's it from my side. If you need further help, please get in touch with me. So here I'm back, and I still have that problem not to get Morten's voice again. So Morten, maybe Morten, you can send me a message via LinkedIn.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, now it's perfect.
I just had
That's your
to
comeback, Morten.
I was refreshing the browser, but I didn't dare to do it while I was listening to you because I was afraid that it would lose the connection to you. But that is, as you said in the beginning, it's a fantastic thing about technology, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
it's. So, Andreas, I really liked your presentation, and you are, as I also started talking about when I introduced you, is that you are very skilled in using it, and I think that. You are admired and hated at the same time because you are very good at also sharing your ideas and opinion. Would you say that? I mean, one thing is how to use it, social media as a communication platform, but is it also? I mean, does that also change the way that we experience a brand? Because I mean, if you look at Nike and Coca-Cola and Adidas and some of the major global
Yeah.
brands, if they are not really able to capture the more personal kind of thing that social media is, because that is the as you wrote, it was like the conversation equals conversions, right? And I was just thinking, do the big brands have to rethink a brand strategy around social media that is different?
They did. All of them did. And it's interesting when we talk to companies like Procter and Gamble. They have the biggest customer base in the world. 5 billion human beings around the globe are using their products.
Mm.
And they were the very first getting into that world of social media because, from their product management side, they rely on a customer. If you have Pampers, and they spend a lot of money for marketing research to experience the parents using their products with the little babies. But it was too complicated because it was traditional market research. Now they were the very first using webcams, and immediately they got the response and they could share it at the same time.
Mm.
So the major brands and even the GAFA companies who are the most successful in the world, they do communication and conversations in a different world. And the relationship to a brand is not to be impressed. In Germany, companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz, they want to impress customers. And you have to buy my product, and there's no benefit. And this modern way of doing marketing using social media and print, for sure, is not to impress, not to manipulate, to catch up thoughts of people, how they experience your brands. So it's more or less social media is perfect for catching up in real time the customer experience.
One of the things that I know that you and I have been talking about over the past couple of months, I think, is the measures. Because I mean, if you look at I think that most marketing people today, they always look at conversions and clicks and number of viewers, and and I'm pretty sure that this Learn with Us event will also be judged whether we can attract an audience or not. Maybe not only live but also afterwards. But I was just wondering, because I think it was last week, I couldn't help trying one of these social media reach networks analysis companies, right? For me, it's like, because we had like an index of 253,000 with INKISH, and I don't believe it, first of all. Secondly, I was comparing with some of our very good friends. I would say way more established media than ours. They were only half of us. And then I looked at some other good friend, and that reach on social media, that was like 5 times our reach. And it was based on a very, very few interactions. And I'm just wondering, how can we trust the numbers? How can we trust? Because I mean, because you are a follower, because you are interacting with you, or because you do things that is social media kind of whatever, right? Doesn't mean that it has the money in the bank value kind of it to it, right?
Yeah, we have to differentiate, because I don't believe in online display advertising. because the way you do advertising in printed magazines and newspapers and also in the traditional TV, this is a totally different world. It works there. But online, the number one KPI is the quality and relevance of your content. And even if you have an innovation approach, you never can be mainstream, but you can create thought leadership. And then is the point how you can quantify thought leadership. It's exactly driven by what I said. It's not driven by the traditional reach created by advertising. It's driven by the response you create in form of comments. So Morten, when you look to your posts, and you are exactly, when I was thinking about what is the beauty of social media, I was thinking about how is Morten doing his job? And everything is done with your heart and your brain for sure. And that works. When you see how many 10,000s of people are sharing our messages for the last couple of months, that's amazing. But it's mainly on LinkedIn, and you don't have good tools to track, to create statistics out of LinkedIn. You have to do it more or less manually. But I love to do it that way because then I can see if I have a good post, creating a big reach, I don't care. But getting relevant comments back, that is enriching my own thoughts. And so my next story will be better. That's the way to do it. It's when I started blogging after Drupal 2012, I started my blog Value Trend Radar. I think for 2 years I was not aware that I have statistics in my system. I was just blogging and blogging and blogging, and all of a sudden I saw that I have 10,000, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 readers from more than 100 countries in less than 2 years. That was amazing. Instead, it's being concentrated on creating good content.
Andreas, before we have to leave this interesting discussion, Robert has a question to you, and I urge you to answer it short if you can. Is on the chat. He says, "How do you advise engaging influencers in SoMe?"
That happens because first of all, you have to know who are those influencers which are important for your own business, and then get in touch with them, connect them, follow their messages, and comment on them. And if you can contribute to their world, they will share your content as well. It happens more or less automatically when you are really aware of who is important for me, who do I have to get in touch with. It's very simple, and all of them will react if you have a question or whatever. Those people are very nice, and they are not snobbish. Good influencers are not snobbish.
That was, I think, a good answer. Will you stay on the chat for a second if there should be more questions?
Sure.
Okay. Andreas, thank you very much for your time. And in just 7 minutes, or 8 minutes, we have Mark Hinter from Rico Europe, and he's going to talk about something that is completely different from what we just spoke about. He's going to talk about investment strategies. And I had the pleasure to review the presentation yesterday, and I think it's very good. And for those who are not interested in Rico, I can tell you that it is actually giving an honest and almost unbiased view on what to look into. And I'm pretty sure that Mark Hinter, he will be happy to comment on this one as well. So thank you very much, Andreas, and see you soon.
Okay, so I log out as a presenter and I come back as a normal visitor of those beautiful sessions.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Morten. It was beautiful, and I hope I was not to do too much blah blah blah. And
you were very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.
You too. Bye. Well, isn't that Mark Hinder? I can't hear you, Mark.
I think it just could be, Morten. Can you hear me?
It could. Yeah, I can hear you, and so can the rest of the people that are joining us. I can see that it's, people asking about these kind of webinars. I don't really understand the figures here, because 72 registered for this particular event. 16 is live on this one, and I can see we have about another 40 on our live channel, so on YouTube. So watch out what you're saying, because it can't be very expensive for you, right?
Exactly. So what you're
Yeah.
saying is mind my P's and Q's, as they say.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. No, let's. We are a little bit ahead of time, but that doesn't matter, because I know you can talk forever. So let's start. Right? Mark, you work for Rico Europe, and you are responsible for business development. And I think that everything was just like in a perfect hotspot, and then COVID-19 came.
Yeah. It's and I think for me, it's we're incredibly busy in the business development area. It's become now paramount for us to mobilize. We've done that, numerous sessions, things like this webinar, and customers, I think, now are starting to realize exactly that COVID-19 is giving them a chance to maybe hit the pause button a little bit and understand exactly what they need to do, and refresh some of the things that they perhaps have been doing subconsciously. But now is the time to really dig into what we're going to talk about today. Is clearly business planning and investment planning. So I think certainly COVID-19 has been a challenge for the industry. We know that. We've seen it from customer conversations, and the impact to revenue and profit, and the way that it's taken our industry to what we're going to hopefully talk about today, which is what is going to be the new normal. What's going to be the back of this once we get through it, and I'm confident we will get through it. The industry is very resilient. We're very creative as an industry, and we always look for innovation and ideas. So I guess that's what we're going to try and understand today.
Yeah. When I asked you to participate in this Learn with us, I said the same thing to you as I said to everybody else, that I don't think the time is really the time where you pushes like huge investments and acquisitions, and whether it's in software and hardware or business development for that matter. I think that every communication comes a little. First you have the crisis itself, and then what is on the other side, and then you start to, and that was why I appreciated so much that you told me that you would like to talk about investment strategies, because investment strategies is not something that you have to buy now. It's more about how you look into how to define the need, figure out the risk of the investment, and evaluating the market opportunities and all those kind of things. And that is, as I said before we went live on this one, I said that your approach to it is, of course, it's branded Rico, but I think you have really done a good job of making something that is generic. And I think I appreciate that everybody of the people that I have been talking about this show is apparently open-minded for having a broader discussion about some subjects rather than just having product presentations. Does that resonate with anything in your mindset?
Exactly. And when you and I spoke and you offered me the opportunity, this is an industry coming together. It's all of us wanting one outcome, which is to be successful and to pull together through it. So what we're going to talk, it's true. And what we're going to talk about, and what I'm going to take you through, is what is effectively business acumen, generic ways to help businesses to plan and then look at how you get through this. I think the key importance is now we have to plan. In the past, perhaps we've been a little bit, we will do some planning, we'll get round to it. But now we have to plan, and we have to plan an exit strategy out of COVID-19, which is going to lead us to success, and more importantly, to revenue and cash. And we have got to focus on cash generation right now. That is key critical. If we're not generating profitable business, then the outcome could be quite interesting for many companies. So
are you talking about vendor side or printer side or both?
I think, wow, it's a good question. That's a good question. I think for all of us, we're all in this together. It's teamwork. You know, at the end of the day, we rely on our customers to, you know, that are going to invest with us. But if we're not giving something back, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, then we're not investing in them to sustain a future, which is going to help us to grow as well. So it's mutual benefit. And that's what we're looking at, and that's why business development services right now, you know, we're starting at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and we're working late into the evening. And the plans and everything else that we've been working on, we've mobilized us really quickly. You know, we're holding numerous calls online like this with customers to help them get through, and to make sure that at the back end of this, they can not only survive but then move into growth as well.
Well, I suggest that we turn off our cameras and our microphones, because just so people know that this is a pre-recorded session that Mark did together with Jan and me a couple of days ago, and then we have a chat afterwards. Okay?
Absolutely. Thanks, Morten.
Okay, perfect.
The industry has changed, and it's impacting the way we do business, changing the way we work, and impacting heavily on revenues. Media coverage of the pandemic continues to debate what life will be like after COVID-19. Many from the media are predicting things will change forever. For business, what does this mean, and how are we going to navigate a path through this? The issue is that when we are faced with a challenge, we first need to be optimistic and look at the glass half full. Capitalize on the opportunities COVID-19 can bring us, but be innovative. But what does innovation really mean? It all starts with an idea. There are many examples throughout history of how ideas have turned into new products that create wealth or help the well-being of society. For some, this process can come easily. For others, it can be challenging, but when you consider what's involved, the process isn't that difficult if you adopt some simple principles. The first step in the process is to ideate. This is where companies create lists of possible business concepts and ideas that could potentially be modeled. Don't be limiting either. No matter how strange the idea may feel, value everyone's input. The process of ideation has led to many new products and services being successfully introduced, and I'm sure the person who invented the sticky note was wondering if the idea would catch on. Once you have something you feel is usable, the next step is to create a mock-up or a prototype of your product or service. We'll go into this in a bit more detail shortly, but this is a key part in the ideation process. Our ideas must be linked to the user, the organization or individual that will require your product or service. Test first how much you know about them and their needs. What value will our idea have, and is there a large enough opportunity? This we will call market size or business scale, and we will touch on this more later in the presentation. When validating, ensure you can prove the user has the need through insight. The internet has allowed us to research insight easily to back up the business case to invest. Rico works closely with many leading industry research companies such as Keypoint Intelligence, IT Strategies, and Smithers Para, as well as trade and industry bodies. This insight allows us to demonstrate where opportunities exist, but at this stage does not confirm there is a workable business model. This we will go into shortly. Testing the insight matches our capability to develop the approach and generate income. We now have to consider which ideas or business concepts are actually achievable and can be modeled. The simplest approach is to create a list of ideas and match these to your existing capabilities, then review if you have the ability to capture the opportunity. Two key areas: size of the opportunity in monetary terms and scale. Can we generate enough profit, and is the opportunity short, medium, or long term? We need to ensure we are reducing risks and maximizing the business opportunity. We will be going through this in a lot more detail later on in the session. Don't be scared also to experiment with product concepts. It's another vital and essential part of developing ideas into solutions for clients and managing risk. The last thing is to launch a product or service and then find out that it fails due to either a technical reason or the user experience is not well defined. We have seen companies quickly producing, for instance, face masks to meet the demand for protective equipment during the COVID-19 pandemic. Prototyping is a key, and the new normal will be how companies work with their clients to prove the business case. Innovation will drive the industry to new opportunities, but those print companies who can turn their ideas into working concepts will be fast to capitalize once we come through this pandemic. Take time now so you're able to mobilize once the lockdown eases. COVID has also proved that the solutions and services the print industry offers can fulfill the needs of consumers and even grow in times of crisis. The increase in demand for greeting cards, for instance, during lockdown, households and consumers being forced to remain at home has meant that they have had to find ways to purchase cards and merchandise. The adoption of online shopping and ordering will, I'm sure, continue, and COVID has educated new audiences on how to create highly personalized cards. Web-to-print and cross-media marketing automation are providing essential services for remote, homebound users, and companies will take full advantage of this. Consumers and creators can develop their designs easily using these platforms, which are readily accessible. In the future, these people now educated on how easy it is to design and ship personalized products will create new markets or increase the demand for existing products and services that are available online. So we have an idea which we believe makes sense and will generate income. Now we need to review how we can reduce the risks of failure. To launch our product or service, we need to consider risk and ensure this is removed or managed. A balance between the potential income the opportunity can create and the risk and cost of failure. A tried and tested method is to use the Ansoff matrix. This teaches us when we move outside of our existing business, supplying existing products to an existing client base, there is an amount of risk. For instance, if we do product development, taking an existing product and creating something new, there will be an amount of investment required. Time, resources, technology, etc. All of these have to be factored in and calculated and managed. Market development can be as simple as taking an existing product and looking to attract new clients, or a combination of new products to target new clients. This again needs to be managed, and we need to consider every element and plan accordingly. The highest risk comes when we try to diversify. Change direction completely, perhaps launching products we have never produced before, such as direct-to-garment printing. We must manage every element of risk and ensure we prove the business case. We have to ask ourselves, therefore, some key critical questions. The new normal may mean sales having to sell with no face-to-face contact, using video conferencing platforms. Therefore, how are sales going to be able to articulate and demonstrate our offerings? Will sales have enough contacts to chase? What will be the new KPIs that will be required to measure our business? These are and other important questions, I'm sure, that need to be answered. Ultimately, of course, we have to invest time to review our approaches and build a sustainable business model. The concept of the business model canvas provides us with the basis to do this, with 9 key areas to focus on. For instance, the first key step is your value proposition. What are you offering that is meeting the needs of your clients at a price that they feel they can afford, which will drive return that you desperately need? We have to follow the remaining 8 steps, capturing all of the relevant information to ensure the business model is sustainable and can be tested fully before we implement. So let's now look at the business model canvas in a bit more detail. The business model canvas, also known as the BMC, is a strategic management tool to quickly and easily define and communicate a business idea or concept. It's a one-page document which walks through the fundamental elements of a business or product, structuring an idea in a coherent way. Why do we use it? To quickly draw a picture of what the idea entails. It allows us to get an understanding of your business and to go through the process of making connections between what your idea is and how to make it into business. It looks at what kinds of customer decisions influence the use of your systems. It allows everybody to get a clear idea of what the business will likely be. If we then look at how we use it, the first step, box number 1, the value proposition, is fundamental to any business or product. It's a fundamental concept of exchange of value between your business and your customer and clients. Generally, value is exchanged from a customer for money when a problem is solved or a pain is relieved, which is what we ultimately want to do. The next section then is customer segments. Customer segment is the practice of dividing a customer base into groups of individuals that are similar in specific ways, such as age, gender, interest, and spending habits. This is absolutely critical that we understand this segment and we look at where we are actually going to target. Are we going to be looking at B2B? Are we going to be looking at B2C? You know, what types of individuals will look at using our products and services? So we need to be focused clearly on this area. The next area then is customer relationships. So we know our value proposition, we know the type of people that we want to target, we call these personas, and now what we want to do is see how strong our customer relationships are. We need to test if those relationships are strong enough that we can capitalize on them. If they're existing customers, can we easily, readily launch a new product that they're going to be attracted to and actually sell into that customer base? The next bit is channels. Now, normally this would be defined as, you know, are we looking to sell face-to-face? Are we looking to sell online? But we also need to consider things like social media and the influence that these other channels may have in actually defining the purchasing process. So as we move through this canvas, we're looking at how we can absolutely build this to make sure that we have the right level of activities and details captured. In step number 5 comes the key critical bit. What's the scale or value of this business? Is it big enough to warrant us actually making the investment? But we won't know all of this until we've captured the other elements that are involved in the business model canvas. So we look at partners. Clearly, Rico, we are a partner to many customers, and we look to structure our activities in the way that we can support you to build business. But if you look at box number 8, key activities, this is where we're going to define what marketing activities, what sales activities, what product concepts. There's a whole host of different things that we need to consider and actually capture those into that area. Then we need to consider the resources that we've got as well that can actually help us to achieve the activities that we need. And then finally, the cost structure. What is the cost to do all of this? It's an involved process, but one which is actually pretty simple when you start to get into it. And we at Rico are using this with our customers to actually help them to navigate through COVID. So if we look now to marketing. Marketing is often overlooked, but is a key part of any business plan. Making sure your value is promoted and that sales can be supported is paramount. Here we give you just some examples of the things you need to consider when developing and executing effective marketing. So, in summary, what we're looking for is a business model that's linked to ideas and ideation that can be proven and that we can absolutely launch this out into the marketplace with minimal risk. to support you, Rico has a whole range of different services and solutions that we can put together to navigate through whether or not a business concept or a business idea is workable and achievable. Our industry has shown it can be resilient in times of crisis, and I'm confident we can pull through this. But the new normal may be different to what we have been used to. We're back. I can't hear you again. I can't hear you, Morten. Now I think I can hear you.
Unfortunately, you can also see me.
Hey.
So, Mark, thank you for a great presentation. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
How long time did it take you to prepare it?
The tools and everything else that's gone into that presentation, we've been using now for some time. When you prepare a presentation, clearly it does take you time to, make sure the slides work and the flow right, So yeah, it's a few days. It's a few days. But the main point that we're trying to get across is that the process and everything that we do is not difficult to follow. You just need to take the time. And when you get into it, you'll be quite surprised on what actually can come out of all the back of these types of exercises. And and I think the other thing to point out is it's got to be teamwork. It shouldn't just be one person coming up with the ideas. You've got to value everybody from the production floor through to sales to marketing, logistics. Everybody has a voice, and they should be heard as well.
But the reason I'm asking is because sorry, the reason I'm asking is because I think that often you have not you, but you in general things is takes a lot of time not to just think the ideas, but also to not to present them either, but also then to do them. And I think that when you changed to Rico, you rather quick after you got into your new position, called me and said that you had some ideas about how to support the printing industry by also having this approach of being in an advisory role. Is this like a step that Rico is now taking in? I mean, because obviously everybody wants to sell, and obviously we need to focus on cash flows, and obviously we need to focus on revenue and profits and all those things, and that goes for every of us, right? But do you think that the shortcut, I know there's no shortcut, but do you think that the easiest way to get there in a longer term is to help everybody to understand some of the metrics and some of the ideas behind this? Is this, do you understand what I mean?
Well, let me answer the first part. Clearly, the reason why I'm a Rico is because Rico is investing heavily into business development services. We had to mobilize a lot quicker. So we have a plan. Let me put it that way. And we've been working on this plan for quite some time. COVID meant that we had to bring forward some of the things that perhaps we were going to showcase at Drupa. And we've mobilized in a way which can support customers in that first step of the process, which is the business model. There's a whole host of other things that we're looking to do and that you'll hear about from us over the course of the next few months. But once you understand that process, that then can take you into different areas. So if and that process is not dependent on the size of the print company. So if you are a small print company or you're a large print company, that methodology can work for everybody. So by simply looking at the amount of business that you can generate from a cash point of view, and we're talking now at this current moment, it's all about generation of cash and profit. And if your activity is not going to generate cash or profit, then stop it. Focus purely and simply on the ones that you know can lead you forward. That approach that you've gone through will test that theory that it can actually be linked to either product development. If you're going to develop something new and offer that, if we take PPE, we've seen that from numerous print companies now that have moved into that, and they're capitalized on it and generating some good income, which they desperately needed right now. The next thing is what's going to come after PPE. And that's really then when you've got to start to process it through all of those fundamental steps. If you then consider, you know, your team, and in a team there are numerous people who have got ideas that perhaps sometimes you just think, oh, do you know what, I just really wish this guy would just go away. He's just always coming up with ideas, but none of them ever seem to come through to fruition. But that process, but it's true. It's true.
Are you talking about me?
More, and would I dare? Would I dare? But I think that process then allows you to filter the good ones and put them in a priority matrix where you work on the ones that can generate the cash. But then you've got to consider the other elements to it. You're going to have salespeople that are capable to sell. The new normal may mean that we have limited, for a period of time, it could be a year, it could be 18 months, nobody knows, of limited face-to-face contact. Therefore, you've got to be working in a virtual environment, video conferencing like this. So, you know, personalities come across in different ways. You know that, you and I have known each other for a long time, and you know, some people have an approach where their personality is great in a face-to-face environment, but when you put them then behind a video screen and a camera and you ask them to sell, it can be challenging for them. So that all of this has got to be comprehended, and we've got to put it in a way which allows us then to take the business forward. And we've got to also capitalize on the technology and the services that are out there. Work from home is going to be quite a new norm for some time.
But the reason I was asking was because, and maybe you answered, maybe I just didn't understand it 100%, is, you know, if we put it to exaggeration, right? It's like in old times you had, like, you know, see if I can find something that looks like an order book, right? You went into the shop and said, okay, you need this, and then you said, and you just sign here, and then we send it to you, right? Then everybody started to talk about that project sales, because we needed to understand the customer's needs, right? And I think it's like every time we update technology, and the technology becomes, to some extent, maybe more productive, but also becomes to some extent more expensive, right? The investment is more. I mean, if you buy a Ricoh inkjet engine and a full bindery automated, that takes you down for some dollars or some euros, right? And I'm just saying that the knowledge and the risk that you take, you also talk about risk in your presentation. I'm just saying that those kind of decisions need maybe better decisions than the mom and dad shop had in the old times, where it was like father to son saying that, okay, son, listen, here's the keys, and next time you upgrade a 4-color machine, that would be great, right? I mean, so the knowledge that you need to have in order to do the investments without jeopardizing your own future, to some extent, is,
well, that's what we call insight. That's insight. That's in the presentation. So,
which is why I'm asking, because I'm just wondering if that is like something in general there's a higher demand for, or need, at least.
Yeah, you could look at the purchasing process in the past as being slightly emotional. You know, somebody would look at, you know, you'd walk into, let's take a car. You walk into a car showroom, you see the car you love, and you think, actually, that is the car that I'm going to go for. And it's an emotional connection between you and the product. I think now within our industry, there is still a degree of emotion. People need to feel confident that they, you know, they can invest. So you're still always going to get that element to the buying process. But now what you've got is a lot more intelligence, the insight that backs up that the business model actually can be sustained. And, you know, we've said this to numerous print companies, you know, if there isn't a strong business model, don't invest. If there is, then these are the steps that you need to do to actually then progress from, once you sign the order paperwork, to implementation, to training, to then looking at, you know, engaging with your customers, etc. So the idea of product development, for instance, can be looking at maybe a new device. It could be inkjet, it could be direct to garment, it could be anything that's there, and looking at what products can you absolutely create that has market appeal. Then that leads into marketing planning. You know, how am I going to reach that customer base? What channels am I going to use? Andreas talked about social media. It's important. It's really important to make sure that you've got a strong presence, but you've also got to have a personality when you go online. So just saying that you have a website or that you are doing social media or you're just putting content back out there, that isn't giving people that emotional connection between who you are as an organization. So you've got to create a persona when it comes to social media as well.
And how is that for I mean, you represent a large company, and the bigger the company becomes, the more difficult it is to get the social or the relation. I mean, I don't know about Rico Europe, but I know for sure that some of your American colleagues, they're not so easy to get hold on if you try to call them, if you try to write them, or and maybe that's a cultural thing. But I'm just saying that if you need that personal relationship, if you need to have the insight, if you need to have, in a social media profile, you also need to have like identity kind of thing, right? It requires also that you have a way higher interaction with your customers than you used to, right? Or even prospects, I would say.
No, absolutely. And again, it backs up why Rico Europe are investing in me and investing in business development services, because we support two key fundamental parts of the business. We clearly support our customers, but we also support our internal salespeople as well. So the education, the programs, everything that we do from business development services is educating internally as well as is educating externally. And we're always looking at how we can do that to make sure that we're promoting the best of what we can in a way which creates effectively a shared mutual benefit. The customer can see value in what we do, and we've got the customer where we know that we've actually got a plan on how we're going to support them long term and develop that customer's business.
Sounds great, and I think that it sounds promising because, to be honest, I believe that what you're saying is for sure true. But I also think that, fortunately for the printers, a lot of vendors have started to see that they need to support them in not just a short-term business perspective, but also in how to develop the industry. I can't help referring to a conversation I had with a gentleman from Heidelberg 2 weeks ago, I think it was, because I was saying to him that I think that one of the things that I feel a little bit sorry about for the printing industry, that we're so good focusing on applications and on technology, and so little on how to sell more print and how to put it in, so the end customers will value the printed product, not maybe as a comparison to social media, but as something that can do something else too. Is that something that you believe that Rico also in your role and maybe in the future will be also focusing a little bit on helping the PSPs to engage more with their clients?
I think you might have read my mind a little while ago. So, okay, so let me share on some of the topics that we're working on and the modules and everything else. So we need to start to think about a product as a business need. We tend to focus a lot on printed products and try and almost to kind of adopt like a retail type approach. We produce X, Y, and Z at a price, and then we put it up on a website and we go and promote that, that product. We've now got to start to think of what if we are creating solutions to people's needs. So if you take the greeting card, which people have always looked at and said, you know what, this is great. And there's been some absolutely amazing designs, some really great innovation platforms that are out there. But when a crisis hits, the first thing is that people say, I can't get to see my elderly parents, but I still want to let them know that I care about them. So they take pictures of their children. They're even, taking pictures around the house, creating funny types of cartoons or whatever, uploading it and then sending it. And it was proven from just watching different media outlets and stuff like that, the impact on people's mental state when they are forced into isolation can be quite challenging. So by just a simple little thing like that is creating a solution to somebody's need. And we've got to now start to think about that a lot more when we actually create the products and services that we're going to then target out to the companies that we're looking to achieve. So yes, in answer to your question, yes, absolutely we are.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm just watching the chat while we're talking, not so much activity, but Miriam Halabivichova or something like that from I think she works with Konica Minolta actually. She writes, Mark, do you think that local smaller printer can succeed in online business, for example, with postcards considering there is so many bigger players at the market already, players like mypostcard.com or Vistaprint, what is the key for smaller printers to enter online world? I think that is in extends very well to what you're just talking about. So what would you say to her?
Well, the first thing is you've got to understand what the investment costs are going to be and whether or not it's worthwhile even entering into that market, because it's right, there are some bigger players out there, but let's look at it in a different way. Smaller players can be disruptive and they can mobilize very quickly. And it all, again, depends on innovation and ideas. And if you can create a product or find a gap in the market, which somebody else hasn't done, and you can exploit it very quickly, then you can go after it. But also, if you consider what's going to be potentially new opportunities, direct to garment, for instance, t-shirt printing, we've seen many companies over the last 5-10 years going through that platform of ideation to create new products to take it to market. And I think this is where you've got to sit and do your research, look at who your competitors are, where there are potential gaps in what their offerings are, and then go off and test. So, you know, speak to some consumers, find out what is working well, what isn't working well. Again, the user experience of the platform is absolutely critical, because we've seen so many of these types of platforms where you start to create a postcard or you start to create a greeting card or something like that, and then suddenly it doesn't go the way you want it to go. Searching for templates can be challenging on some of these platforms, you know, so it is going to be about doing your research and then finding the gap in the market.
I, of course, don't know her motivation for asking this question, but I couldn't help thinking a little bit, because I think that all the digital print vendors have also been focusing on, of course, variable data, small print runs. I even think that a lot of you guys have been focusing on, or telling your customers to go into small print run packaging, and all these, and I was just wondering, because there was I can't remember, I think maybe you were there, because I was with the Print Next event in Stockholm a couple of years ago. The Swedish Federation, they made this huge survey where they asked who's actually creating value. And it seems that in this industry, it seems that every time a products get a lot of attention from vendors moving in that direction, the first thing that happens is that you get a larger supply than demand, which of course then leads to lower prices.
Exactly.
And then leaves that segment of the market into commodity, and that leaves that nobody's making money on it, right? So I'm just wondering, because if you, for example, when Miriam is asking about the postcard thing, maybe it is a business where you should just say that, okay, it's for the few. It's for the few that are really big, really.
But that's going to be an output from your business model canvas, because if your cost structure is so high compared to your income, then it tells you not to invest. So that's why that BMC structure, the 9 stages that you go through, will absolutely lead to probably the conclusion that says this one is not a workable business model.
And that is where you would help, because I mean, I think that the if you should be a little bit maybe unfair, because I know that you have a genuine interest in what you're saying, but I also know that, or maybe I'm wrong, but it used to be that digital print vendors, they had a very, very big focus selling a lot of units, right? So sometimes it's like, could you be in a situation where it could be like, okay, we really want to support the business approach to our customer, but we way more want them to buy a box. I know it's unfair. I'll answer
it, because you've on times I've been on your channel, you've always asked me difficult questions, and I've always given you a response, and I will never ever not give you a response, because that's just not fair. So I think it's put this way: as a print company has got to meet their targets, and they've got to achieve their targets. Vendors have got to meet their targets as well, because at the end of the day, to grow and then to take that income that we generate to then reinvest in new technology and new services, we've clearly got to sell. But I think we've got to look at it and approach customers in a way which meets the customer's needs. So the hardware, the solution, the software, the business development services, all of that has got to be tailored to exactly what that customer expects from us. That's called a partnership. And if there is no partnership, then you don't take it forward, and you lose that customer ultimately anyway.
And I would have been I would have been upset with you if you didn't have answers to my questions, because you always do have them, right? So that was great. I got a few questions here that are not online but was sent on an email. So I have here, it's 4 or 5 questions, so let's take them. The first is, doesn't even say the name of the center, but is it time during COVID-19 for companies such as Ricoh to launch new products and solutions?
Well, absolutely, because the reality behind it is that the new products and services that we always bring to market are always better, and probably in some reality will meet or develop the customer's business in a different way. So you can't stop launching products and services just because of a crisis. What you've got to do then is offer the support and everything else around it to make sure the customer can see the business benefit, and that then supports the investment.
Okay, clear answer. Robert has sent, first he said hi to you. I think it's Robert from Render Press. You should know him.
Okay, yeah, I think I do.
Yeah. And then he writes, right sides, and in brackets, capacity, equipment is important. Utilization is key to profitability. Too much iron on the floor drains profit. I don't think that's a question. I think that's a statement, isn't it?
I think that's probably a statement. I think that's the statement. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's similar to you know, if you have an offset press and a budgetly hourly rate, and that press is not running, and you know, you've got to make sure it's utilized in the most effective way. But that again is all looking at your production processes and making sure they're optimized and most efficient for whatever jobs you want to run on.
And in extension to that email I referred to before, do you feel that commercial printers can work remotely and stimulate enough interest in their products and services?
I have actually been really encouraged. I think when it first happened, we all saw the rabbit in headlights moment, where we were completely startled and we went, oh my God, how are we going to get through this? But then people picked up the challenge, and I've been talking to commercial printers who have been doing their own webinars and doing their own events with 30, 40, 50 people joining and actually getting some business on the back of it. So yes, they can, but they will need support. You know, selling online is different to selling face-to-face where you've got a personal relationship. And demonstrating your capabilities can be slightly different, but that's again around presentation skills and all that sort of stuff. But the answer is yes.
I also think that it comes a little bit down to the platforms, as I mentioned. I don't know if you were here from the beginning, but this is the first time that we're doing anything like this on INKISH, and we invested in this webinar jam platform. And I must admit that I feel that it goes pretty smooth, and it works with having both the combination of chat and films and things like that. But it doesn't replace, for me, it doesn't replace anything. It's it's something that is added to it. When we did over the Skype for the past 3 weeks, it was really good. And we had decided to do it also after the COVID-19 because it gives us another advantage that we can, you know, communicate fast and easy and cheap, which is not too bad either. But it will not replace the INKISH films that we go out and go to your customers and to your competitors' customers and see what they do in real life applications. I think that is so that is where I you know, kind of see this. But you obviously you have been under lockdown as well. So have you been using? I mean, obviously you use Teams and all these Zoom and these things. How is that from a? I mean, I guess you talk to some of your colleagues who's in sales. Is it a limiting factor, or do they reach their budgets anyway?
The first thing that we realized is we didn't have a background. So we were doing Teams and our branding wasn't in the background. So we quickly then, because we do use MS Teams, and one of the features you have in MS Teams is a green screen where you can use the face and then you can have the logo in the background. And what became quite interesting was then the amount of different pictures that people were using when they were coming onto MS Teams. So internally, I won't go into it, but you can imagine the types of pictures that were coming up. But
no,
then,
I can't, Mark. Sorry.
No, you can't, and don't go there, Morten. But then from a corporate perspective, clearly Henkaku, our branding and everything else, we made sure. So that's when you then got to start to think about it. So if you do start, and I'm quite disappointed, Morten, because you don't have INKISH TV behind you right now. Where's the branding? Come on. But this is the thing, exactly. But this is what you've got to consider. So when you start to move into all of this sort of stuff, yes, it's great to mobilize and to go into these platforms, but then you've got to consider that, what are you then going to, how are you going to capitalize? How are you going to develop it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Mark, we were so fortunate that we started like 3 minutes before, because Andreas for once didn't talk as much as he used to. So that gave you actually 10 minutes more, because now it's almost 2 p.m. and this is the end of today's Learn with Us. I think it's been brilliant talking to you and to
Thank
all
you.
the other people as well. I hope that even now your session is over. I hope that you will maybe join us for some of the other sessions the following days.
I've signed up for the whole week. Clearly, I've got a day job to do as well, Morten, to support customers, because
really?
they yeah, exactly. There's a lot of customers that need our help right now. But certainly, and I just want to thank you, the INKISH team, and also the rest of the industry for pulling together to make this happen. Because to get through this, we all need to work together.
Appreciate your words, Mark. Thank you very much, and
Thanks,
talk
Morten.
to you soon. Okay.
Thank you. Cheers, Morten. Take care.
Yeah, you
Cheers.
too.
Bye bye. Bye bye.